So, who can tell me what LGA stands for? Does anybody know in
Local
Australia?
government area?
Yeah.
Almost there, Laura. Yeah,
It's something to do with local government. I'm not sure.
it is.
Yeah.
So it's local government authority,
Authority. Yes.
and yes, we
Walga, West Australian
local government
Local Government
authority,
Authority. There we go. Yes. Okay.
and ALGA. They have the same thing for the local government authorities as well. So half a point there, Laura. The translation really is that it's your local council, and we're going to talk about councils today. So let me move on. For those of you who do not know me, Laura, we haven't met, but my entrepreneurial journey began when I was just 8, when I turned my homemade my go-kart into a shopping trolley, and I went to meet the coaches as they arrived in Blackpool, and I offered to take the visitors and carry their luggage and take them on a bit of a guided tour to their accommodation. And I needed that money because I'd burst my football, and that's what I used to do most of the days, play football all day. So using that entrepreneurial instinct has come natural from that age. It's got me out of situations many times. So I left school. I went down the traditional pathways of career because my career advisor told me that number 9 for Arsenal was probably a bit of a stretch for me, and that being an engineer, I would have a job for life. But Maggie Thatcher had a bit of a say in that job for life because as a 4th-year indentured apprentice, she broke the steel industry and the coal industry and the unions, and for the first time ever, indentured apprentices had nowhere to go. So I had to make a choice, and I just one day went and started knocking on some doors, asking if I could clean their windows, because I've been cleaning my mother's windows for quite some time. And I built up a nice little window cleaning round that tripled my apprentice income in about 4 weeks. And that was my first venture into a proper business with my window cleaning round. In January this year, I decided that I was going to reconnect with Kommuniti and rebuild the unity that I think has been missing from Kommuniti for quite some time. And the pandemic actually showed that as a human race, we do need each other. We do rely on each other, and we do quite often need support from each other as well, especially if you've been quarantined in your home for the required amount of time. So moving forward with that community theme, in the end of last year, I came across these 2 gentlemen, Ted Howard and Gar Alperitz, and they are the ideology behind the community wealth building that is really the driver of community. And they founded the Democracy Collaborative in 2000 from the University of Maryland. Since then, they have developed a model called the Cleveland model. I'm just going to show you a little video what the Cleveland model and the Preston model are all about, if the technology works. All right, well, there are 8 basic principles behind the Democracy Collaborative's Cleveland, Ohio model, and the Preston in the UK model. So it was very interesting for me to have done the research and for it to link back to Preston, because I grew up just 15 miles away from Preston in Blackpool in the UK. And whilst at the time we didn't understand what a wonderful community we were growing up in our social housing estate, because obviously we were considered lower socioeconomic, but we had a marvelous sense of community, and the old sayings of going next door and borrowing a cup of sugar or a couple of eggs, and then not having to immediately go back to them on payday and return the eggs and the sugar, but you'd certainly do a swap for maybe picking their children up and minding them whilst I did some overtime at work. So there was a true meaning of community, and I think that's really where my drive for founding Kommuniti comes from. So 50 years later, we started using the principles that really did create a wonderful childhood for me. But I'm going to skip over the first 7 principles and just go straight to basic principle 8, because that's where community wealth system begins. And it's not about 1 or 2 good projects in a community. It's really about establishing a whole ecosystem for the community. And I know those of you who've been, along to a repair lab or to a farmer's market will understand the importance of having those types of events in all communities, not just some. It should be a opportunity for those who have small businesses to be able to get out into the community and compete with some of the multinationals that are draining the economic life from our localized economies. So taking the first step towards community wealth building, we do have another video here. But basically what the video is saying is that we have a wealth problem, we have a wealth distribution problem, and that is because of the way that most modern governments work in measuring GDP, and they're not actually measuring the health and wealth of a community. So basically, there's a community wealth building centre of excellence that is now very prominent in the UK, and it approaches all of the what they call anchor institutions and asks the anchor institutions to spend locally so that they can recreate that cash flow that's so important to a localized economy. And what they've managed to do is they've managed to turn Preston into a city that had the highest crime rate in northwest England and an undesirable place to be, to within 4 to 5 years being one of the most desirable places in the UK to live and to start a business. So what they do is they ask those anchor institutions to forget the price factor. If it can be sourced locally, that they source whatever procurement they need locally, and that money really then helps to create that circular economy, that circular cash flow. So you can see there's a link. They've got some fantastic information. I advise you, if you are interested in community wealth building, to go and visit this site. And they have set up a community wealth building centre of excellence. So it's a fantastic resource to go and have a look at. So basically, we are at a point where there have been lots of individual organisations working on the new economy, working on some of these projects, community wealth building or universal basic income or cooperatives, and they are all part of the new economy. And this presentation is brought to you today in the 4th of the series of from the NENA Perth Hub. So we are a hub from the New Economy Network Australia, and there are 3 conveners: myself, Adam Jorlam, who I know most of you will know, and Kate from Galactic Cooperative. And Kate has really set some good groundwork for worker type cooperatives in Western Australia, because we seem to have a habit of not wanting to be first. We want somebody else to do it first and take the risks before we decide to jump on board ourselves. So Kate has established it successfully, and you've got a talk coming up soon, Kate?
I do, in September. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but I think it's one of the first ones. Would it be the 9th or anyway, watch out for it.
There are so many things going on, aren't there? It's just amazing that that we can find time every now and again to do one of these, these webinars. So, but basically, you can go to, if you haven't already, Laura and Charity, you can go to NENA's site, which is neweconomy.org.au. You can see the geographical hubs there. You can see the sectoral hubs there, and there's a massive information. And also very soon a convention in November time where all of these things will be brought together, and I'm sure the technology will be handled far better than the way I'm handling it today. So to go back to my local community, and being the first one to establish a community wealth building trial, if you like, in the suburb of Kingsley, in the city of Joondalup. So we have a little over 5,600 homes with average income there of approximately $116,000 per year. That means that right outside of our doorstep, there's around $650 million in gross annual income. So if we could get that circulating within our local economy, that sure would have an impact, wouldn't it, on the local small businesses. So what I've done is I've partnered with an organisation called Nextdoor. That organisation is like a social media hub, but it's only available for your suburb and a couple of surrounding suburbs. So it works a little bit like some of the Facebook groups. You really do focus in on localized information and asking for the recommendations. It's a fantastic tool for doing that. So last year I moved into Kingsley. I knew a couple of people. I wasn't really socially active with them, but I certainly was aware that I could use the Nextdoor platform to really tap into this, localized hub. So I went about using the platform. They provided all of the tools that were required. Sent out letters on my behalf, and within a very short period of time, we've actually taken our standing in Kingsley community to number 1 in Western Australia and to number 2 Australia-wide. So the top right-hand corner there, you can see Con and Jeff. Con nominated Jeff for being one of the best neighbours in a promotion that Nextdoor was running, and Jeff actually took out the national award. So he's a very humble gentleman. He's won many, many awards for his engineering, and he also finds time to be a fantastic neighbour. So those kind of stories have heartened me that we do want to be connected with our extended neighbours. It's not just necessarily those who live in the street or around the corner. You all really have something to contribute within your suburb and surrounding suburbs in your local government authority. So our Kingsley community's reached over 1,200 subscribers now. We've got 2 community cafes each month. So on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of each month, we run a community cafe, and that picture in the bottom left is our gathering. And we have approximately 12 people come each time, and we talk about those local issues that we might have been talking about on the hub. So it really actually starts to build trust in the community, because we're actually linking in with each other. And even though, in a Facebook group, for example, you may not know those people or ever get to meet them, because it's very rare that they come offline. Whereas with our Nextdoor platform, it is all about meeting people where they are online, but bringing them offline so that we can start to establish trust and start to understand what community wealth building is, because most people won't have heard of it. So in our government model, I did a presentation a few weeks ago for ENCL, and there was a lot of discussion about ownership and about how the governance would be handled, and been doing a lot of work with an organisation called Sociocracy for All, a fantastic organisation, and basically we work in circles, and those circles have a leader which link into whatever other circles come into play, and it allows people to own and operate their own circles within our community wealth building associations, clubs, and groups, etc. This is the inside of Nextdoor, and you can see that just being a member of Nextdoor is a valuable tool for locally connecting people. They talk about all sorts of things. Yesterday, on the left there, that top post, somebody, it's a Second Bite representative in this area, and they distribute foods that are perfectly okay, but they are past their display by date. Not their use by date, their display by date. So she distributes that to anybody in the community who might want to save a few dollars and get some wonderful food.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Quick, Al? Do you know if that platform, if we go onto Nextdoor,
Yes.
online, would we be able to see if our own suburb is part of that? Is that how it would work?
So when you go to nextdoor.com.au and you register, every suburb is registered. Some might have 3 people in, some might have 300 people in. Basically what happens is that somebody like myself might decide to become the lead for the area, and then they start to send out all the postcard links and email links, which can be sent out by anybody within the community. Nextdoor will do it on your behalf, and that's how it starts to build the community, and then that's how we start to build the trust. So yes, the story of Nextdoor is basically one that somebody tried to rip off their platform. They brought it to Australia from America. They called it NABO. They got some massive investment funding, over $10 million. But what they didn't understand was the ideology of Nextdoor, and they couldn't monetize the platform as NABO. But they cheekily went back to Nextdoor and asked Nextdoor if they wanted to buy them, and Nextdoor said no, quite point blankly said no. But what NABO did was they then decided that they would do the right thing by all of the users, and they would hand the NABO members over to Nextdoor. So they got a really, really good head start at Nextdoor in Australia. They now have every suburb mapped, and as I say, it's now up to a few people who wish to take it a little bit further and become suburb leads to drive the groups. And if you liken it to a Facebook group, it just takes 3 or 4 people responding and reposting and sharing, and then all of a sudden it becomes an active group, and people want to be part of it. If you've only got 1 or 2 people in your suburb, it can be a bit challenging to find the time to go and look in the group to see if anything's happening. So disappointing was the word I was looking for. Anyway, we are in the process now of taking those 1,200 subscribers that we have in Kingsley and creating our circles of sociocracy and offering them alternative activities, offline activities, like an edible gardens club, like a community kitchen. That's the next one we've got on the development board. We also have a walking group. We have our community cafe. So there's activities for everything that people might be interested in their own recreation. And if we don't have an activity and they suggest one, then we'll go about making that a club and an activity. If you think about what we've put on the screen here, Kingsley's got 5,600 homes. We already know that there's around $650 million worth of income just sitting out there on the front doorstep. Over 13,000 residents. How many club combinations do we think we could create? A crocheting club or a book club or a babysitting club. There could be hundreds of clubs. So let's take a rounded guesstimate that we could create 10 clubs with 100 members and each of those members paid just a nominal $2.50 per week to be part of the club. We've done our secondary research on that, and that price barrier wasn't a challenge for this particular community. And even being a member of multiple clubs, 4 clubs for $10 a week still wouldn't be a challenge for most of the people that live in this particular area. But if we had 10 times 100 members at $2.50 per week, and that's $2,500 of unencumbered revenue that our association can create. And as we build the trust in the community and we take that even further, if we could reach 20% of the Kingsley residents, and that would be 2,600 residents at $2.50 per week, just one club, that'd be $6,500 per week. So you can see very quickly these kind of figures could mount up. Now, how many properties could we buy in Kingsley with $6,500 a week? How many businesses, could we possibly start to buy up and create jobs for in our community, and make sure that the people who are in our housing cooperative are actually spending their money in our local businesses, because they might, we might have created a job there for them as well. I can see that I've skipped a slide on this particular presentation, but I mentioned about a housing cooperative. There are 3 or 4 housing cooperatives already in Western Australia that have been quite successful. So we have a model that we can adapt to the Kingsley Housing Cooperative model, just by utilising what we've done in Kingsley and saying, let's do that to the rest of the city of Joondalup. And then when we've filled the city of Joondalup, then filling the city of Wanneroo, filling the city of Stirling, and going about just the same process, which has only taken me a little over 6 months. Within 10 years, if we were to get to every single local government authority, if they had an average of 20 suburbs, that's 10,000 jobs created for community leaders or ambassadors. And if they've all got 1,000 subscribers per suburb, that will be an influential following of around 10 million people, which is vote changing, which is democracy changing, and which would really establish ourselves, as a major contributor to the GDP, if they're still using that by the time we've created this Australia dominance. $1.3 billion just from that $2.50 per week. And they're simple sums. It's not rocket science. I'm not trying to baffle people where the money comes from. It just comes from people going about their daily recreational activities, but we put the money to good use because we're a social enterprise. So we are taking expressions of interest for people to become ambassadors. It's not something that might necessarily be rolled out overnight, but once you've put in an expression of interest, then obviously we know that we can start to build the direction for wherever you might be a community ambassador. And that will be just simply using the Nextdoor platform, allowing Nextdoor to post out all of those letters on your behalf and building a subscriber base for free. So I can't really see anything that could be much better than that at this moment in time. But that ends my presentation. I did have another couple of slides on the cooperatives and the businesses, but are there any burning questions? Now, I can't see the chat. Kate has quite kindly been monitoring the chat, and hopefully if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat. And first of all, I'll ask you, Kate, that's the first time you've seen the full presentation and the numbers, and knowing what you've done with the cooperative. Does it sound confusing to you, or?
No, I suppose what I'm given the most recent webinar that I did with Michelle with NENA, talking with Helena from
Yes.
I want to say
Yeah.
Wellbeing, no Wellness. Anyway,
Local futures. Yeah.
I have been wondering how to get Galactic Cooperative more involved with more alternative economies that are around us, and maybe using this Nextdoor platform is a good idea. Although certainly on a personal level, using it just where I live. So I live in Bentley, and the city of Canning already does try to involve people locally. It would be great to, yeah, I'm really interested to know if it's already something that I could join here, or
Absolutely.
or if it's something that, like you said, you know, I might look on there and there's just me and one other person. So, which would be disappointing, but possibility to grow. So that's cool. But certainly within our business, I would love to have more connection with either other businesses and just people. Yeah, it sounds really interesting, Al. I need to get, I might actually present this presentation that you've just done with some others within the cooperative as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I've only given you a little snippet of what Nextdoor is all about. You can go on there and register your business. You can get recommendations, which will start to create a ranking for you.
Right.
And it does start with that first step of just registering. And if there is only 2 people now, eventually when we start to build these ambassadors up,
Yeah.
the ambassadors will take on that role of driving the community.
That's it.
You know, to
And
become
I'm no longer on Facebook.
Yes.
And I'm choosing not to be on Facebook at all. So apart from using LinkedIn, which I find really good, I like being part of that.
Yes.
This I've been trying to find another platform. I really miss my Buy Nothing group on Facebook.
Yeah.
Even if it was something like that on the Nextdoor platform, that would be brilliant. Yeah.
You can create your own group for exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, I've created those groups for the cafe, for the edible garden, for the walking club. You know, they're all free activities, so there's no barrier. And what's happening is, well, what happened yesterday, I went to see Ash about that second bite food, and when I walked in the door, her mother was there, who's a member of our community cafe. So that 1 degree of separation was happening in the local community.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
And then her neighbour walked in from across the road, and her and I used to work together 14 years ago. So, you know, again, it's just wonderful to see it in action. Yes. And, you know, we know that we are motivated by our feelings, not our thoughts first. Your feeling comes first and your thought comes second. So if you have a feeling of happiness from that human connection, your thought of happiness will actually start your activity towards getting more of that happiness.
Charity, did you have a question?
No, and I don't know. I muted myself because I just wanted to say that the Nextdoor thing sounded brilliant. You know, I live in Margaret River, you know, so there's lots of really interesting right-on people, you know, down here. But there are a multiple of different platforms, and I consider myself to be involved and got my fingers in many different pies, and I can't keep track of all the pies and all their different ways of communicating. So it would be great to have something that had a purpose, that, you know, centralized the sort of atomization of all the different voices, you know, that we've got. And as soon as we finish here, I'm going to go on and have a look and register. Great. And just, you know, see how I can use it, you know, down here, and start getting all the people I know who are the movers and shakers, you know, to sort of be more coordinated, I think, really, you know, and if something like this would help that, that would be great.
Absolutely. You know, the Nextdoor platform is a beautiful way to start to create your own community hub. that's got nothing to do with community necessarily, or, my community. But you can start to bring your associations on there. You can start to work with local council. I'm part of the strategic community reference group for the city of Joondalup, so it's been easy for me to just keep mentioning to them that the Nextdoor platform is there. I mean, they get approached all the time from people telling them about their different technologies, so they're very, very careful in what they do actually get behind. But they're looking at the Nextdoor platform because they can actually have push notification out to all of the different suburbs, even though they're individual suburbs. They put one push notification out, and every Nextdoor member within the city of Joondalup will get that notification. So that could be really, really powerful. I don't know of anything that I've seen before where the council pushes out those notifications. They might use Facebook, or they might use their website. I haven't seen them do push notifications. So,
Al, can I ask you a question, Al?
Sure.
How easy, hard is it for you to communicate with all the other Shire sustainable officers, that are representing local regional governments and stuff? Do you all know each other? Is there a sort of, is that systematized, your communication with them, or are you just still trying to put the feelers out and find out who's who?
Look, to be honest, it's a minefield trying to find common ground. And even with WALGA, there are some that are really proactive with WALGA. There are some that are not so proactive with WALGA. There are some that have signed some declarations of, can't quite remember what the wording is for it, but about councils working together collaboratively, and then there are others that don't. There's some that are driven by their city mayors, and others that are driven by their CEOs, and people not understanding that councillors have very little say in the administration of a local government authority if that local government authority doesn't wish to listen. So they don't have to listen to their councillors, although that's what the councillors are there for. Sometimes if it's politically motivated or driven, then they might decide to take a different pathway. So it is a challenge. Are you connected with Craig Matheson down there?
Yeah, and Saul Cresswell. So I've just found, when you sent me, or Kate, or when you sent me the names, I went, aha, of course. I expected to see Saul's name in there, definitely.
Yes.
And Craig, I know around. It's a fairly smallish community, so we all sort of know each other a little bit. And I actually sent them both an email this morning to say, hey, let's discuss all things NENA, or how we might improve and work together to kind of NENA-ize our community, or what we might be doing. So I look forward to having a cup of tea or coffee with those two and see what we might do down here.
You have a woman councillor, I can't
Naomi
remember
Godden.
her name. Yes.
Yeah. She is she's the biggest, one of the biggest council warriors in town. We've got two really great female councillors who are full-on sort of campaigners, community campaigners from grassroots. They're fantastic. But true to Margaret River style, we've got a few old school, I call them, developers, who became councillors. So it's one of those types of scenarios where building momentum to change stuff down here too at that level. But
I would have thought, I think it's Naomi, because she came to the NENA conference last year. That's where I met her, and I just found she was a little controversial, shall I say, at the conference, but I loved what she had to say.
That definitely sounds like her.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. A lot of energy, a lot of but really, as you say, hardcore. So then people are going to be all sorts of the way they respond to her, but the energy is going in the right places, that's for sure.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of that down here. There's a lot of environmental activism. There's a lot of activists, you know, and there's a lot of campaigning going on, and I would like to see more coordination of those efforts and less siloing, you know, so that we can all join together a bit more, and have a bit more unified voice, I think, really. Yeah.
And the purpose of you know, NENA Australia wide is to create that civil paper and documentation strategy, and you know, that will require input from all the different areas to try and find where those common grounds are. And I'm hoping soon that I've just got to speak with Michelle when she's free, to have building community wealth as one of the sectoral hubs, so it does become a little bit more mainstream. It's a little bit ambiguous in, you know, well, how do you build community wealth? And
yeah, and my understanding, and I really, you know, obviously haven't looked into all of the stuff that you've written, Al, yet on community wealth, but I'm getting a sense that obviously the community wealth building is a sort of social enterprise type model. Is that way too basic and too simple a thing to say?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Basically, it's a whatever people want it to be. So some might want to create a cooperative, some might want to create an association, some might not want to have the hassle of running those types of things, so they just want to, you know, be a group. But sometimes the reason I've gone down the pathway in creating Community HQ, so, you know, by driving the marketing and the ideology, people can make up their own minds what it looks like in their particular community. So, but if we got some shining examples of it working well, I'm sure people, you know, will make that decision that they might want to follow that kind of pathway. Laura, what area do you live in? Who's your local council?
My council's pretty controversial at the moment because I live in Wembley.
Ah, wow.
So, yeah, City of Cambridge is having a few difficulties, shall we say?
You know, it sort of moves around, doesn't it? You know, it was the City of Joondalup had some massive difficulties 15 years ago or whatever it was, and, you know, councillors were all sacked and executives were all sacked, and then Perth has had its challenges and Cambridge. So there's a new form of democracy actually coming out as well. And what I mean by that is that there are people, it's called Democracy 2025. Mm-hmm. So if you go to their .gov.au website, they talk about democracy being in decline, and less than 10% of Australian citizens actually having any faith in you know, the economics and, you know, and the governance of Australia. So, and it surprised me what it was. You know, it's a .gov.au website. So very interesting that there are those who can see the impending doom if we don't change course. You know, I think having gone through what we've gone through with COVID, there's been a little bit of respite for our national politics, but once those payments stop, and once it really kicks in that those jobs are not being created in significant numbers, I think there's going to be some pushback from the general population, and I think that's where NENA really is well positioned to, you know, to offer some solutions, you know, in those direct, you know, those areas. So, you know, if you can't earn more, the best way to try and keep afloat is to not spend as much. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then we get the cooperatives and the repair labs, and then, you know, once consumerism drops, you could see from what happened with COVID what Mother Nature could do after the world hard drive had been defragmented and consumerism slowed down. You know, all of these natural beauties were coming back to the fore again. So, you know, even for the non-believers, there's a believability that consumerism is creating the problem, and how do we do more with less? And I think we have that mindset if we're involved with organisations like NENA and ENCL. But like I put on the slide, what's been happening is we've been in our silos and then coming together in the central point, but we're not bringing the general population to that central point. It's just us. So we're telling the stories to ourselves and getting reinvigorated and inspired, but the community at large, which at the end of the day, they are the key to everything. They control the whole economic output for Australia. And if we can win them over at $2.50 per week, we could have a significant change of politics, change of the ideology behind well-being, and more people having ownership and direction and control within their localized economy, which when Helena says it, she says it so wonderfully, doesn't she?
Yes. Al, can I ask you, or anybody, either or two, I think a lot about how to build support, from everyday people, in my town. And back in the day, in the days of socialist Britain, where politicians used to door knock, they used to actually go around on people's houses and just knock on their doors and talk to them. And I sometimes wonder, social media has a place, absolutely, but it doesn't substitute eye contact and the power of the personhood, going around and speaking to people and gaining support. And I have often thought to myself, if I choose or decide to represent anybody, whether it's NENA or anything at all, not as a counsellor, we don't all have to be standing for a political position, I think, and to be able to just go around and into shops and retail areas and knock on streets and say, hi, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness and I'm not running for office, but I do have something else I would like to talk about. And here's a little thing called Nextdoor or NENA, and that's it, and some people will stop and speak. Some people will close the door in your face, but I don't know how else to, to really kind of just, knock on doors, walk the streets, do the meterage, make the eye contact. As a very slow but really important way of building support.
I agree. I get out talking to people all the time, and I must say, when I did run for council, it was one of the best things I did. I think I chose a particular suburb, particular area, and I just went and knocked on people's doors, and the response, the majority of the response was, wow, you're knocking on my door and chat with me. Wow. So I think, the 283 votes that I did get, I think it was because I went and talked to people.
Yeah, totally. And I think, if I had a clear, manifesto, let's say, by NENA or communities, or I had something, just even some ideas, equipped with some really well thought out ideas that had proven success in other, Joondalup or Kingsley or wherever, and I walked into all of the retail, up and down my street, who are closed every day, like all the shops, they're empty and closing. And if I said, how would you like it if there was another way where you could, actually survive, in this world and still run your business, but in a different way, that benefited more people, I feel like, I'm sure I could really make it that way. That's what I've been thinking about, how I might start doing that myself. Not for anything or anybody, no votes, I'm not, or anything. No. Absolute planting an idea, and that's all it is. And then if social media gets out there, there's a connection. I remember that she came round and she said something next door. Click on, have a look, and then, so I've been thinking I might start. I was going to talk to Saul and Craig, about those sorts of things, how we might sort of advance forward a little bit on that.
Okay. So, and keep in mind that there is a business structure that's called a cooperative, and hardly anybody knows about it. So,
yeah. Yes. And I think the trouble is down here where I live is that there are a political, you know, every word is laden, you know, and so sometimes a cooperative to somebody, oh my God, it's the 70s. It's the 70s, you know, it's those people, it's that crew. So you've always got to be really benign, you know, all the time, so that people don't feel like, oh, she's one of those greeny maniacs, you know, from down the road. You know, there's always that one, but it's the same challenge for all of us. But yeah, I hear you.
But when you eventually mesh, so, you know, if you start to do some of this work with Nextdoor, and then you learn more about community and our community kitchens and clubs and blah, 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 I'm sure you will introduce them fairly quickly, because they're a great way of getting people off the Nextdoor platform and meeting locally.
Yeah.
And edible gardens, you know, you're not talking about cooperatives or blah, blah, blah. You're just talking about growing some veggies.
That's
And
right.
people are very receptive to that at the moment.
And
so,
here, you know, we have a transition, you know, we're a transition town.
Yes.
You know, so, and of course, the great people doing great things. But when you knock on someone's door and they say, well, who are you with? Are you with the transition bunch? And then, you know,
Yes.
I have to say, no, I'm not, but I do believe in edible gardens. You know, but I'm not with anybody. I just, how about an edible garden out on your verge? You know, no politics, no ideology, no tribes.
Yes.
Say that, just like that, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. But if I was able to build during, you know, COVID, that 1,200 subscribers and launch 3 clubs, and we got the other one on, you know, just about to go. Then, you know, when COVID's not there, we will actually pick up the pace a lot quicker. And what I'm getting at here is this meshing, okay? So your activities and your population, it might only mean that instead of getting 1,200 people, you only get 100 people, okay? But in the city of Stirling, which has got, you know, the highest population density, they might get 3,000 people. What the commonality that's going to pull it all together is that co-ownership in however form it takes, it, whether it's an association, whether it's a cooperative, whether it's a mutual, whether it's a society, and it's using that language that ties it into, you know, into the new economy, and the new economy ties it into NENA. So, you know, I'm hoping that with the sectoral channel as well, and, you know, with what you do, Kate, and being, you know, a lot more proactive in that as well, and then having each of these individual clubs and meetings happening all over Western Australia and Australia, by default, you're starting to gather these people. Yeah. And their thinking and change the energy. You know, everything is energy. We pick up on good or bad energy quite easily, don't we? So if we're all talking about the good energy of the new economy, people will pick up on it, and it won't be about selling it. It'll be about just putting them in the environment. Before we go, Laura, because I know we're pushing on here, you know, we've talked a lot. You've had your challenges there. You're part of ENCL. What are your thoughts on what we've been talking about?
Well, I guess I was wondering about the whole, like, you know, where actually is the money going that's going into these clubs? Does it go back into the individual clubs? Like, what happens with that? And I mean, from our perspective, like, you know, we've already got friends who are sort of long-term unemployed. And, you know, and we have a housemate who lives on the smell of an oily rag type of thing. So in terms of accessibility, like sort of thinking about those costs, there may be people who can't actually meet those costs like around us. So yeah, I guess I was just thinking along those lines and those sorts of issues. I actually started a WhatsApp group for our street for the COVID-19, which has kind of died a bit now. We'd still like to have some verge parties, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. The weather hasn't been kind to us recently on Sundays. Yeah, I guess I was also interested because my parents live in Kingsley, so I was wondering what was going on there too. But Yeah, and I had been thinking in terms of like, how do we create like more community in our street? I know there's a lady up the road that has been like, you know, putting things in people's mailboxes, like letters about various sort of, you know, developments and things that are happening around the place. And so that was the angle I was coming from, was thinking, okay, we've got, like, we started here with the WhatsApp group. How can we kind of keep that going, sort of post COVID, post lockdown, etc.
And they're very valid points. And you know, part of my reasoning for founding Kommuniti was I was living the dream 12 years ago, or I thought I was, and then all of a sudden my wife was diagnosed with cancer that metastasized to the liver. She was only 38. Prognosis was 3 months to live. Our daughters were 8 and 10. We lived at the top of the cul-de-sac, as I say, living the dream. And then within just a couple of years, in my grief and some poor financial decisions, I became homeless with those two daughters. So, you know, the saying that you could be only 3 paychecks or challenges away from homelessness, I've proven that it can happen and does happen to anybody. So the theory behind Kommuniti is the fact that we want to get people doing what they enjoy doing, and to receive the value of what they're doing, for them to say, well, $2.50, I can't even get a cup of coffee for that. So spending 2-3 hours at a community cafe or an edible garden or whatever they're doing, the value far exceed the $2.50. And for those who wouldn't even question the $2.50, it is going to mount up very, very quickly for there to be surplus and to buy just one property. So if every suburb just had one property, it's supported by the members who are getting their value for money. We could put somebody escaping family and domestic violence into that property and not have to worry about who's paying the mortgage or whether they can contribute, because the community is supporting them. Now, what I've found with most people who want to hand up is, as soon as they've got their hand up and they're back on their feet, they cannot wait to give back. So hopefully it'll be self-perpetuating. And like you were saying, Charity, is who or what or how do you say to somebody that, you know, well, I know you've heard of that, but, you know, now there's this. I'm going about now not seeking permission to do anything. I'm actually just doing it. And, you know, because we're so new, what's going to happen in 12 months' time from today is we'll have all of those documented successes, and the momentum will actually pick up a lot quicker. So what I'm doing is I'm walking the talk every single day. Yep. You know, it's 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to meet the 2 local councillors from this area, and the local politician. I'm going to a community dinner with the Labour politician next week, and the Liberal politician messaged me yesterday asking if he can catch up. So they're actually coming to me now. I don't chase them for anything. Mm-hmm. But I've got 1,200 subscribers, and I've got these clubs, and the Miralinga Centre's happy because we're going to turn their front yard into a community garden. So that trust, you know, people have heard all of these stories. It's when you meet people face to face that that trust really starts to you know, to become strong. And I'm hoping that, you know, despite my technical inability today, at least you've got the gist of it's about people having ownership in their area. Not, you know, not like a Microsoft or a, you know, or a Google or a Facebook, where they create multi-billions of dollars and then it looks as though they're doing good for the community by putting $1 billion into some form of charity. You know, it's the multi-billions of dollars that should be going back into the community. So if the community owns these assets, owns these homes, owns these businesses, has its own credit society. How powerful is that going to be in keeping the money locally and stopping the multinationals siphoning off what should be building the local circular economy? And if we've got edible gardens, look at all that fresh food, fruits and vegetables that can go into the local communities to support those who might be doing a little bit tough. So like you said, you mentioned you've got some friends. It might be you that's the member, but the spin-off is for other people in the community who are doing it tough. When you walk into a coffee shop, and I might have just come from Shelter WA. I do a lot of work with Shelter WA and the Alliance to End Homelessness. But when I walk into the coffee shop next door, I'm not looking around going, oh, look, they look homeless, or, they can't afford a coffee. Everybody who's in that coffee shop is going for a cup of coffee. They don't care where they came from, blah, blah, blah. They're having a cup of coffee. And I'm trying to make our fundraising, doing an activity. What happens to the money afterwards should be a byproduct. You're getting the value from your activity of $2.50. But the social enterprise is, and the true definition of a social enterprise is that 50% of its profit must be put back into the community. Well, I want to exceed that. I have a ceiling on what I'm expecting to earn from being a managing director of Kommuniti HQ, and my ongoing wealth creation or retirement strategy will come from being a part owner of these community-owned businesses, and there could be many of them. We could start off that, fish and chip shops, for example, they come on the market quite often, blah blah blah, or other takeaways, because business salespeople sell those types of businesses to migrants so that those migrants can actually, through the back door, get into Australia. Those migrants have got no interest in the community. They've got no interest in keeping that business a profitable business. They're just there to actually get a business visa to be in Australia. So the community suffers when that happens. Now, the community would support its local businesses if the experience at the local business was a wow factor, because that local business knew its customers. And that, I go back to Blackpool when I grew up, I got paid in cash. I could take my pound out of my paycheck, go across to the coffee shop and get my coffee. The coffee shop would go to the newsagents next door and buy the newspapers. The newsagents would go to the hardware store. The hardware store would go to the fish and chip shop, and the fish and chip shop hired all the locals. So the pound might well end up back in our household. And you fed the whole community from that same pound. So if we can recreate that circular cash economy, it won't take long before people are going, oh, I want to be part of that as well. And especially when they can start for free just using the Nextdoor platform.